Welcome to USS Global. The balance in the Middle East has shifted considerably in recent days. After the last dramatic airstrikes in Iraq and Syria, the United States, with the support of the United Kingdom, has launched a new airstrike against the pro-Iranian Houthis in Yemen. This was the 12th airstrike carried out by both countries in the region. This latest airstrike by the joint coalition was very important for freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and to change Iran's regional policies. For a long time, the Houthis have been targeting and attacking all ships passing through the Red Sea. But with the 12th airstrike, the US and UK air and naval forces shook this oppressive authority to its core. One of the most important dynamics of the joint airstrikes was that the US and the UK cut off almost 80% of the Houthis' communications networks in Yemen. The strikes focused on Hodeidah, Sana'a, Taiz, the Al-Bara area in Makbana district, and the Haifa district. 85 targets were destroyed in 13 different locations in these settlements. In total, 11 raid airstrikes destroyed communication networks in Taiz governorate. This is the first time that the US and the UK have carried out airstrikes against communication networks in Yemen. It is reported that there is currently no connection across Taiz. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sari said that the US and the UK carried out 48 airstrikes on 6 Yemeni provinces in the last hours of the operation. These airstrikes destroyed the Sana'a airbase in particular, but also communications networks in the important port area of Hodeidah. So with these joint airstrikes, the US and the UK have completely cut off the world's communications with the Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. Iran will probably not like this at all. Tehran is allegedly using Sana'a, Hodeidah, and Taiz to communicate with the Houthis and provide important intelligence data. With the information coming from these centers, the Houthis carry out drone and missile attacks on oil and cargo ships in the Red Sea, as well as destroyers and cruisers of the US and UK Navy. The most important Iranian destroyer providing this intelligence data to the armed group in Yemen is allegedly the Alborz, which is still on active duty. However, the recent airstrikes by the US and the UK have made even the routes that the Alborz could take quite risky for Iran. In particular, the facilities in the harbor in Hodeidah are not safe for the Iranian Navy or any other country's naval group. So with these airstrikes, the US and the UK have not only cut the Houthis' communication networks, but also destroyed Iran's link to Yemen. After all these successful interdiction attempts, the US and the UK need to continue to control the situation in the Red Sea, especially for the naval group. So how can the navies of both countries achieve this? Let's start with the US Navy. Recently, there has been talk that the destroyer USS Eisenhower will suspend its mission in the Red Sea. This destroyer is one of the US's main deterrents in the region, so the gap in the Red Sea that will be created by the departure of this ship must be filled. HMS Queen Elizabeth in the Royal Navy was considered for this mission, but in recent days, different speculations have emerged about the ship. During last-minute inspections conducted before going to Steadfast Defender, one of NATO's biggest exercises in recent years, it was announced that there was a significant problem with the starboard propeller shaft of HMS Queen Elizabeth. During the inspection of the ship, problems were discovered around one of the couplings on the starboard shaft. Although the ship remained classed, i.e. technically seaworthy, as a sensible precaution it was decided to withdraw the ship from the exercise until the problem was thoroughly investigated and resolved. According to reports from UK sources, the ship will not sail on its planned route. For this reason, discussions started about the ship to replace HMS Queen Elizabeth. UK officials, on the other hand, signaled that they will deploy HMS Prince of Wales instead of the Elizabeth. But will this ship be as deterrent for the pro-Iranian armed group Houthis in Yemen as the USS Eisenhower destroyer, the star of the US Navy? As a result of the bitter lessons learned from past experiences with HMS Prince of Wales, the Royal Navy has initiated additional checks on the aircraft carrier's shaft lines. As a result of these checks, it was decided that the ship was fit for the mission. HMS Prince of Wales was due to take over the flagship role from her sister later this year. But as she has not yet embarked more than a few fighter jets or a full air group, she will now have to work much faster than planned. So it looks like 2024 will continue to be a difficult year for the Royal Navy. But despite these challenges, the potential presence of the British ship in the Red Sea would be a major deterrent for the pro-Iranian Houthis. It is currently known that 3 main frigates of the Royal Navy are currently in the Red Sea. These are HMS Diamond, HMS Richmond, and HMS Lancaster. Along with the Royal Navy, it is also very important for the U.S. to protect freedom of navigation in the Red Sea with the USS Carney, USS Laboon, USS Gravely, USS Philippine Sea, and USS Mason. Even if there is any change in the presence of the U.S. and UK Navy in the Red Sea in the coming days, the current situation seems to be capable of preventing the pro-Iranian Houthis' aggressive policies in the region from getting out of control. So why are the US and the UK working so hard and spending billions of dollars to prevent the Houthi crisis in the Red Sea? The Red Sea is a focal point for global trade. Using areas like the Bab al-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden saves millions of dollars for these ships. The Houthi offensive has deeply disrupted cargo and oil transportation in the Red Sea. Since the attacks began in November, maritime traffic in the region has dropped by almost 40%. Major shipping companies are now sending their ships through the Cape of Good Hope instead of the Red Sea. This has delayed shipments by 7 to 9 days. Insurance costs have also increased tenfold because of this. The cost of sending a ship through the Cape of Good Hope without using the Red Sea route now ranges between $3 to $5 million. Since the region is a strategic hub through which 85% of U.S. maritime exports pass, the Houthis' aggressive policies in the Red Sea have a serious impact on the U.S. economy. That is why the White House is urgently trying to establish a safe and calm order in the region. It is the same for the United Kingdom. Most of the UK's merchant ships use the Red Sea route. That is why the UK wants to restore freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. To this end, Operation Welfare Guardians, which is led by the US and the UK with the participation of many countries, is still underway. The scope of this operation is to remove the pressure of the Houthis, who are seen as a threatening presence in the Red Sea. But are the naval assets and other measures taken by the US and UK coalition forces in the Red Sea sufficient to stop the pro-Iranian Houthis? The answer to this question lies in the current US policy in the Middle East. Washington believes that the real problem is not the Houthis, but Iran. As in Iraq and Syria, some of the commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and some personnel from the armed groups affiliated with Hezbollah are allegedly in Yemen. The purpose of this is to train the Houthis in Yemen militarily by these military and armed elements working for Iran. Iran is doing this in Iraq and Syria, as we mentioned. Tehran is using its regional forces there to attack U.S. military bases in both countries. Likewise, in Yemen, Iranian agents are suspected of training the Houthis. But these training grounds were reportedly badly damaged in the recent U.S. and U.K. airstrikes in Yemen. No Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders or members of Hezbollah were reported killed in the attack. Some U.S. sources believe that Iran and Yemen, in cooperation, deliberately withheld the identities of some of the casualties. These sources have therefore increased the pressure on the U.S. and the U.K. to now launch a landing in the region. A possible joint coalition landing in Yemen would likely devastate the west and northwest of the country. These are the areas where the Houthis are most concentrated. However, this scenario could further fuel the war in the region, and Iran could become much more involved in the clashes. If Iran enters the clashes, both the Red Sea and the Iraq-Syria corridors could become areas of great risk for the U.S. and the UK. But both the U.S. and the UK actually have the potential to prevent this risk. If we exclude the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons, Iran's success against the US and the UK is actually very unlikely. In addition to its own army, Iran has an irregular armed force. Hamas, one of these armed forces, is already at war with Israel. Likewise, Hezbollah is also in conflict with Israel in the region. The situation of the Houthis in Yemen is clear without Iranian support. Pro-Iranian armed units in Iraq and Syria are said to have fled to the Iraqi border following the recent U.S. airstrikes in the region. In other words, Iran's military power is somewhat disorganized and based on irregular armed elements. Even the 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq and 900 U.S. military personnel in Syria have the equipment and military hardware to destroy the pro-Iranian elements in these areas. In addition to its military capacity in these countries, the U.S. military has more than 30,000 personnel throughout the Middle East. In a mass war in the region, the U.S.-led coalition forces could pose great challenges to both Iran and pro-Iranian armed elements. Thank you for following us.